Hello everybody, my dear English-speaking followers, clients, astrology lovers and friends. Here is Olga and I have a very special video for you today. I prepared separate analysis, a separate video on a very specific, special, very important astrological event of the year, the ingression of Saturn into the sign of Capricorn. As I promised, in addition to my regular weekly horoscopes, regular analysis of weekly transits, I considered that this subject is deserves, a separate video with a specific detailed analysis of the transit of this planet by the sign of its governance. Saturn will enter Capricorn on the 20th of December 2017 and will stay in the sign during the next 3 years. And I call the video through hardship to the stars. You'll understand very soon, after the end of the video, why. I will start with the description of the brief description of the symbolism of the planet Saturn, and of course I would like to remind you, those who know, and to show you those who don't know, the astrological graphic symbol of Saturn. Why do we draw exactly this? This astrological graphic symbol of Saturn is the cross of materiality of the material world, which is the astrological symbol of the planet Earth and of the rising of the Ascendant. The cross of the material world is the symbol of Ascendant. The cross of matter, the cross of material world, rising above the crescent of the soul. And we know that the crescent is a symbol of the astrological symbol of the moon, the past life experience, which is kept in our subconsciousness. So the form and a system. The form and the system, the cross of the matter of the material world, taking its origin in the soul. In other words, in the symbol of Saturn, the cross of matter receives the support of the soul. Why it's rising above the crescent of the soul? Why the material world receives the support of the soul? For people to be able to gather a good harvest, which is something material that we can see and touch, and this corresponds to the cross of the matter of the material world, we must devote our soul, the crescent, in astrology, to our work on earth. The harsh reality of life requires this, to work with to give our soul to what we do, to our labor, to our work. Thus, the earthly and material world reflects different states of the human soul. A person can be aware of the states of her soul, experiencing inner contradictions, internal conflicts, and finding constructive solutions to the situations of conflict. And the word constructive is associated, at least for me, to the material part of this world. Something constructive, something that we can touch, see and touch. It's not about something abstract or illusionary. Saturn forces us to compare all our ideas and dreams with the reality in which we live. Therefore, we learn to be responsible for our actions and to be aware of their consequences. These are the methods of our education symbolized by Saturn. And in mythology, in Greek mythology, Saturn is Kronos, the god of time, the master of time, the guardian of the threshold between life and death, between the temporal and the eternal, the guardian who sets strict limits to everything that exists and who makes everything end sooner or later, because nothing lasts forever, eternally. Little bit of basic information about the planet. The orbital cycle is 29 years and a half. The retrograde cycle, it's 1 year. I mean that the retrograde movement lasts for 4 months and a half during the period of 12 months of 1 year. Saturn personalizes laws, structures, responsibility, representatives of authority, manifestations of the functions of the planet. Saturn makes things tangible, sets limits and orders. We're talking about the physical manifestation of ideas and concepts. In our psychology, Saturn corresponds to our experience of power and of authority, external and internal experience, our perception of the rules of the society and of the world, and how we react to these rules. The motivation that Saturn gives us to make things real, organized, to manifest something in physical reality, to limit and to protect. Saturn symbolizes the following needs: the need for self-confidence in our own forces, the need of self-discipline, and the need for responsibility that we take on our actions. And in terms of health, Saturn symbolizes, of course, bones, teeth, aging processes, skin, ligaments, auditory organs, proteins in the body. This was the first part, a little bit of theory. Now, let's talk about what we are expecting for the next 3 years. Most of us, we know that Saturn in astrology has the worst reputation because, the ancients called him the big malefactor and attributed to him, I will call him, not it, okay, all the sufferings of life. But we need Saturn. He has value as a teacher, and of course he has value as a teacher, and there are few people for whom it sounds funny, because the essence of Saturn is the restriction. It also represents all forms of responsibility, from the individual to the social responsibility. Saturn is the master of karma, and one of the reasons why we don't like him is that he's completely, totally impartial and gives us only what we deserve. The lessons that Saturn teaches us are the most difficult and take a lot of time. From the point of view of astrology, we do not grow up until our Saturn returns to his place, until in 29 years and a half, he doesn't make the tour, the complete circle of our horoscope, until it returns to the degree of the zodiacal sign where it was at the moment of our birth. Saturn embodies maximally the law of alchemy, which states that until we learn to detect and to integrate the energies of Saturn in ourselves, we will constantly face these energies in the outside world. That is, we must find our own boundaries and limits, and we must learn to take responsibility for our own life, our lives, and for our actions. Once this is achieved, we will find a remarkable freedom. Having independently designated our borders for ourselves, we will not be afraid anymore that these borders will be imposed on us by others. So we can calmly enjoy our self-sufficiency, which is associated, at least for me, the self-sufficiency is associated with the freedom. Unfortunately, we rarely get to that immediately without long suffering from the impact of Saturn from outside. That's why we say that until we turn 30, we are not grown up. We have to wait until the first return of Saturn on its place in the birth chart. It takes time, 30 years old, until we turn 30. Saturn represents all those who possess authority or power, all who approve the rules and limits for us. At the very beginning of the journey of our life, these are our parents who tell us, It's forbidden. You cannot do that, for example. And in the future, we are constantly confronted with power and authority, and this experience is most often unpleasant. And as a result, it generates certain worldviews and an extremely limiting life position because it's based on fear. And we create these beliefs for ourselves, and we build walls that protect us from the outside world so that our painful experience of collision with authority and power doesn't happen again. And as these beliefs protect us, we become very attached to them, but they are illusions. This is an illusion. And with time, the slow planets, higher planets, slow planets, will take care of their destruction, of the destruction of these illusions. We live on the Earth. It is a planet where we study in the school of life, and where the three-dimensional space is under the governance of Saturn. Being here where we are, we must respect his rules, the rules of Saturn. However, we are also eternal spiritual beings. We understand that the last word does not belong to Saturn. The ultimate goal of our interaction with Saturn is to learn to play this game, but not to get attached to its result. To live in this world, but without belonging to it. In other words, the reality of the material world and of the society, with all its laws, its principles, its hierarchy, which makes it possible to maintain all manifestations of life within certain limits, which is of course necessary. This is the reality defined by the frontiers, the borders of Saturn, and which is accessible to the majority, to the perception of the majority of us. But beyond the limitations of Saturn and beyond this reality, there is a zone of eternity, a sphere of eternity, of unlimited possibilities, of higher senses. And this zone corresponds to the orbits of the higher, slow planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And before we can capture the vibrations of the higher planets, and before we can go to the existential levels, we must get used to the Saturnian terrestrial armature, I can say that. We must develop respect for the laws of earthly life. This is how I see the things. Now, what about the transit? With the change of the sign by Saturn in transit, the circumstances, the modalities, and the conditions of implementation of the principles of the planet change for the period of approximately 2.5 years, 3 years. How could we achieve long-term goals and solve complex problems of our life? This is the question that we ask when the Saturn enters transit by another sign, the following sign, the next sign. When it changes the sign, what restrictions will we face? We also talk about restrictions because Saturn symbolizes restrictions. I would like to remind you that since September 2015, Saturn was in Sagittarius, and our most serious projects were concerning the development of ideas and concepts, distant countries and travel, higher education. Of course, these are key words for the sign of Sagittarius. The main tasks of Saturn in Sagittarius, or its transit by Sagittarius, was the expansion of perspectives and of horizons of life, the acquisition of wisdom, the acquisition of knowledge, and this could occur in a regime of crisis and major limitations, because we talk about Saturn. Limitations. With the transit of Saturn in the sign of its governance, the sign of Capricorn, we will have to look for our realization in society and for the definition of our place in the world. Saturn is always an encounter with reality, and Saturn in Capricorn, it's a double encounter with reality, which expects obligatory and necessary result of our actions. If we talk about any sign of zodiac, and if we look at it in the context of the axis, if we ask ourselves what is the place of this sign on the axis, of two signs, opposition with another sign of the opposite sign. If we talk about the axis of the signs Cancer, Capricorn, this axis symbolizes the path of vertical ascension to the pinnacle, from the bottom to the top. And the mountain peak is also always associated, it's an image of what? Aspirations, ambitions, achievements. For this reason, Saturn in Capricorn, it's a very serious time, the transit, which can be marked either by the ascent to the top, or it can be heavy with painful falls if you don't learn the lessons of Saturn. In the process of approaching our social peak or social pinnacle, we can hardly expect quick and easy results, or we can hardly expect, to be able to rely on an accidental chance. We must prepare ourselves for many difficult tasks, for a large workload, for a maximum of responsibility and commitment. The main objectives and achievements of this period of Saturn in Capricorn: professional achievements, status, position in society, career, the definition of our place in the social hierarchy, the creation of professional structures, for example, opening for our own business. And without doubt, the false roads will be eroded, and the paths of others, the paths that other people are taking or have taken, will not be attractive to us, because we will be looking for our own destination, reviewing the old directions of our life that we've been following, and this can result in the collapse of old landmarks, in being conscious about the uselessness of old efforts. You see, there's the major consideration of our global direction, of our global mission in life, and especially of our place in the society and in the social hierarchy. If we are not ready to take responsibility for our lives, if we have not found the courage to work on long-term goals, we will face painful limitations. What could they be? First of all, this can be the dependence of state crisis, in the country, state crisis, political and economic crisis on a larger scale, in the country where you live at this moment. At the more concrete level, this could be the dependence on elderly people who are, older than you, or on those who occupy higher status in the hierarchy in the society. This can be also the dependence on circumstances on which we have shifted the responsibility for the scenario of our own lives. And if you live in the illusion of security and stability, Saturn in Capricorn will destroy it, forcing us to do very serious work at the moment and in circumstances when and where we are not ready for it. But this will allow us to accept the fact that nothing in the outer material world is eternal and cannot provide us with the security warranties. Every planet has an esoteric sense and a universal principle that we must manifest in ourselves. We must make them, these principles, make them adapted in external reality, and make them manifest them in the external reality. Consciously, we should do it consciously and freely. Otherwise, the principle of the planet will be realized and manifested by force and in rather severe forms. And in this case, we simply cannot ignore this process, and we won't be able to escape from this process anyway. So, as a resume, the transit of Saturn by Capricorn suggests us to count on ourselves to achieve independently our goals, to find an inner core, the inner core that will be the pillar and the support for us in any situation. To make decisions independently, to make choices, to take decisions independently, to make choices regardless the opinion of the authorities, and ultimately to take responsibility for our own lives, not to claim having control on situations and spheres of life which are beyond our influence, but at the same time to be responsible for what is in the field of our authority. To aim for efficiency in concrete actions, which must be brought, to the logical end. All our efforts and actions must result in a concrete, tangible, visible, a result, fruit of our action, result, logical end, termination. To identify the principle, make difference, to identify the principle, the most important, and the secondary, which will lead to the regularization of life and to its structuring. To define for ourselves the causes and the consequences of fears and beliefs that have a restrictive nature. To clarify for ourselves global goals of our life, to determine our small place in the big world, and to make everything, to work, to do everything to work, to make it happen, to work in this direction. Discipline, long-term planning, diligence, patience, fulfillment of obligations must become an internal position. Constant self-improvement, constant self-perfectioning, rising the bar of ambitions higher and higher without being afraid to declare our capacities and our potential. This should be the major strategy of behavior. And the last part, the chronology of the transit period. From December to the 2007 until the beginning or the middle of 2019, the first half of the period will be, during this time we will experience the most difficult phase, when Saturn will force us to take care of the problems that are in the areas of his control. Career status, relations with elderly people and with those who are higher in this hierarchy, relations with the older members of the family, older parents, also the real estate. These are the spheres that Saturn controls, so we will have to attack aggressively the problems in these spheres of life. From the second half of the period, and especially closer to the last degrees of the sign, we will see or will not see the fruits or the results of the work done on the previous stage. And there is another interesting moment here, that during the 3 next years, the transit Sun will form 3 conjunctions with Saturn, which is logical. Saturn will stay in Capricorn, and in 3 years, the transit Sun will make 3 times the tour of the zodiac. So it will form 3 conjunctions in 3 years. And conjunctions of Sun and Saturn, which they will mark the beginning of 3 times of cycles, of this common cycle, Saturn-Sun. And at this moment we will see the emergence of scenarios of annual programs, kind of annual sub-cycles of Saturn. So the dates of these 3 conjunctions, Sun-Saturn, are the 21st of December 2017 now, because of course the 20th of December is not only the day of the ingression of Saturn in Capricorn, but also is the day of the ingression of the Sun into Capricorn. The second conjunction is January 13th, 2020, and this is the third, sorry. The second is January 2nd, 2019, and January 13th, 2020. These are the dates of the conjunction Sun-Saturn. The beginning of each of these cycles will give us an impulse to the completion of our most difficult tasks, when we will focus on these tasks maximally. And last paragraph about the retrograde phases of Saturn. From April 18th until September 6th, 2018, April 30th until September 18th, 2019, and from May 11th to September 29th, 2020. During these 3 periods of Saturn retrograde, we will perceive in the most sensitive way the results of the implementation of programs defined by Saturn in the results. We'll see the results in real events and in concrete specific situations. Here again, everything depends on which strategy or behavior we will choose, and the results can be twofold, double, two different results. Either we approach as close as possible to our objectives, or the limiting impact of Saturn will manifest itself as intensively as possible in our life. But once again, there is a general rules, general advices to any retrograde phase of any planet, and of course, when it will be the time of the retrograde phase of Saturn will comes, I will prepare a separate video on the subject, on the topic, of course. So I hope the video was useful, the information was interesting. I wish all of you a lot of good luck and talk to you very soon.